Alright, let's get started on this exam. Here we go. According to Professor Meredith, consciousness is our awareness of the external world, ourselves, and our behaviors, kind of like your inner voice. Studying consciousness is difficult. It isn't something that we can measure with numbers or a concrete test or anything like that. Everyone has their own definition, and it's different for everyone, so we can't say consciousness is this based on only studying X amount of people, right? So next we learn about the two ways that we can measure it. There's first person and third person. First person is the hard problem, and third person is the easy problem. First person is, but they're both hard. First person is considered hard because it's studied from humans telling researchers. Humans could be biased, they could be lying, not really know how to explain what their consciousness is, or the researcher could misinterpret it. Third person, or easy problem, is when we measure our minds and our consciousness through scans and other brain technology. Although data can be less argued and be more solidified or objective, right? It is still considered hard to measure because you are losing the human observations and the first-hand experience of consciousness. After all, it is what makes you special and what makes us the way we are. A good example of consciousness that is hard to measure and study is love. Love has many definitions, and it means differently to everyone. To me, love is an intense emotion and affection for another person or something. This is just my definition. Yours could be different, and that's why it's so hard. No one really knows what the definition of love is. It varies from person to person. And it relates to me because I believe I was in love at one point with another person, and now can we really prove that I was in love? Not really. I can say I was, or we can take brain scans to see if a certain part of my brain lights up when I think of that person, but it won't be the same for everyone, so we can't really know for sure. Alright, moving on, flow. Flow is awesome. Defined by Professor Meredith, it's when we are so invested into an activity that we lose connection with the outside world, and our consciousness enters a new state of positive vibes, I like to think of it. And as much as a fantasy idea this is, if we think about it, we have all experienced this. We all have been playing a sport, practicing our instrument, working on something we really want to get done, playing that video game. We're so invested to what we're doing that we lose track of time, and it's almost as if we're unconscious or in a new state of mind. I believe the flow, I like to call it the zone, is only for people with an intense passion and love for what they're doing. And this relates to me because I believe I have my own personal flow. In my case, it's the game of basketball. My buddy and I would always go 1v1ing at the rec center, and we were so evenly matched, and we were always going 100% when we went at each other, and we both entered our flow, 100% focus into that game. And I believe everybody has their own flow, and I think everybody should discover that because it's a great thing. It's great when you're trying to blow off steam, get through a stressful part of your life. And I have a quick little video for you guys. It's from an animated show, and it's very fictional and fantasy, but I think it really explains the idea of flow very well.
ゾーンに入ったというのか。
ゾーン、余計な思考、感情が全てなくなり、プレイに没頭する極限の集中状態。練習に練習を重ねた者だけがその扉の前に立つことを許され、それでもなお気まぐれにしか開くことはない。
So again, a very fictional idea, but I really think that video explains it very well. Alright, moving on. Yeah, memory. So short-term memory, according to our lecture, is used a lot in everyday life. This could be remembering your mom's address, your phone number. Either way, you probably use grouping sometime. When we put info into chunks for us to remember, we make these chunks meaningful to us, so then we can remember them easier. For example, if I was remembering the address 41411 Greenway Parkway, I'd break it down. 414 is my phone number area code. 11 is my favorite number, and I really like the color green. So all I would really need to remember is Parkway, right? And this relates to me also because I study a lot using this method, especially when you have to memorize dates and places and numbers. I remember one time I'd try to remember pi, the number pi, and I was like, oh shoot, how am I supposed to memorize this? And I broke it down. I can't remember what they meant to me now because it was so long ago, but I remember the first one, March 14th was a date. 15 was my favorite number at the time. The above information was brought to you by Randy Fletcher. So moving on, this is brought to us by the textbook. As we learned in the textbook, long-term memory is infinite, and we can build lifelong memories. I remember stuff when I was like 8, and I'm definitely gonna remember stuff when I'm 70, and stuff I did when I was 18. Long-term memory is made up of two branches, explicit and implicit. Explicit is when you actually try and memorize and requires conscious thought, like, for example, math skills or learning science concepts. And implicit is when you use your memory unconsciously, and it's for motor skills. And this concept applies to me because I learned a backflip when I was in like 8th grade. Right, I learned it, and when I was first trying it in first training, I was like, I have to jump, then I have to throw my arms up, then I have to tuck. Right, all the steps. And now, after repeating and practicing over and over again, now I can just do it on command. I don't really have to think about it, and it's almost unconscious, which is pretty cool to think about. All right, moving on to cognition. So according to our textbook, one way for us to make decisions is the representative and availability heuristic. The representative heuristic is about making decisions based on how often it happened before. The availability heuristic is making judgments on how available information is to our minds and memories. Essentially, they're very similar, and they fall under the category stereotyping, right? And although often right, many of these times they're incorrect. This applies to me because I am often a victim of these heuristics. Of course, there is some truth to these stereotypes, but I am often assumed that I am unathletic and very good at math. And although I do like to think I'm very good at math, not all Asians are good at it, especially my brother. And I see the representative and availability heuristic a lot in sports. Like when I play basketball, many of the players on the court seem to think I'm not very skilled for various reasons, right? I'm sure you can think of them. But try not to brag. I'm not bad, right? Moving on to the paradox of expertise. According to our textbook, the paradox of expertise is when someone is really good at solving a problem really easily, it's harder for them to teach or explain it, how they solve the problem. That may be why good athletes are not always good coaches. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some good coaches, but good athletes and coaches, but a lot of the time, not so much. This is because when someone is not aware on how they solve the problem and they just did it naturally, it's hard for them to go back and figure out, like, oh, well, what did I actually do? They just did it, right? Now, I don't want to call myself an expert on pole vaulting, but I would say I'm pretty good. And when I try and teach pole vaulting, it is really hard because I was a quote natural and didn't really struggle all that much in the early stages like some, due to my diving background and acrobatics background. And of course, I was still bad at some things, but a lot of things came quick. So when I try and explain a concept to younger vaulters, a lot of them kind of look at me funny and don't really know what I'm talking about. That's why some of the best coaches are ones that had to struggle and had to work really hard to get to where they are, and they were never that really good. All right, moving on. So, intelligence and individual differences. Sorry that cut out, but oh well. There's been a debate if environment or genetic affects your IQ and personality and physical features. There have been studies showing correlations in these with siblings and even more with identical twins, with fraternal and regular siblings coming in last, obviously. And then there's no question that genetics plays a role in these traits, but how much? For height, identical twins had a relationship of 0.92, and fraternal had 0.56, while adopted had 0.16. Obviously, this one is probably defined by mostly genetics. For identical twins, the relationship for IQ is 0.82, and for fraternal twins, it's 0.51. A significant difference, but still a relationship. Expectedly, adopted siblings showed little to no correlation for physical features, but they also showed little to no relationship for IQ, even with the same environment. This is showing that genetics does play a significant role in IQ. In conclusion, identical twins are more similar than fraternal twins, but they aren't perfect copies. Environment does play a role, but adopted siblings are only slightly similar, and a shared environment has little to no effect. This concept can be applied to me because I'm adopted and I have an adopted sibling. There's me on the left, and there's my brother on the right. That's the only picture I have of us together, fortunately. And we are both very different, even though we share the same environment. I'm very outgoing and pretty active, while my brother likes to stay inside and play games on his computer. And we're both the same age, but we're also similar. we both love playing basketball and sports, and we like talking about football and baseball and all that. But we're definitely more different than our like. And I'm probs, and for a like, I'm probably the more smarter one if we're just going off grades. But obviously, that's a whole nother story I'll get into later. So moving on to openness and intellect. Oh, by the way, the prior information was brought to us by Colin DeYoung, and the next is brought to us by Colin DeYoung as well. So, according to our lecture, openness and intellect predicts creativity and IQ levels. Openness means different things to different people, but the way I see it, it's kind of your curiosity with the world. With creativity, there are two major factors: arts and sciences. Arts are more into the visual arts and the writing and the music, while science is more into inventions and engineering. Openness predicts arts by 0.4, and intellect predicts science by 0.3. Openness and intellect can also predict how religious you are, how religious you are, how well you work with a team, and a political stance. How does this really relate to me? Well, it doesn't. I'm not really in the arts or sciences category, and I never strived in the engineering classes I took, and I'm definitely not a theater or musician. I guess I'm not a creative guy by this definition. However, I'm not religious, and I do very well in teams, and I take a more liberal stance. And those all indicate that I would be more open and intellectual. So maybe I'm that. You never know. But again, a whole other question for later. All right, moving on to behavioral psychology. When studying behavioral psychology, there are different methods to increase behavior. 2 types involve increasing behavior, and 2 types involve decreasing behavior. This is also brought to us by Thomas Brothen. In those 2 types, you can either add or remove from your environment. Sounds a little confusing. That chart on the left is a really good tool to show what I'm saying. So if we want to increase behavior, we can either add to environment or remove from our environment. If we want to decrease behavior, we can add or remove, and whether we add or remove is a positive or negative reinforcement. For increasing and decreasing, it's positive punishment or a negative punishment. So let me explain with some a example. So for increasing behavior and adding to your environment, you can give food to your dog if he does something good. So you're adding food to the environment. For decreasing behavior, you can remove TV from a child who refuses to eat his vegetables or something. Or, you're taking away TV, you're taking away entertainment, you're taking away something. And this relates to me because I have to take care of my nephews, Wilder and Orion, a lot. And sometimes I have to use these tactics to increase or decrease behavior. Sometimes Walter doesn't like sharing, so I have to turn off the Wii, and I would take away something. So that would be a negative punishment. But also, and then when Wilder does eat his food, I can give him a cupcake or something, or a cookie, and that would be positive reinforcement. Moving on to observational learning. Observational learning, according to our lecture, is when you learn from others. And this is quite common when a child learns from their parents. Quite often you'll see a son or daughter do something just because their dad or mom does it. Like, for example, swearing. That is why it's a very good idea that you're on your best behavior in front of your kids, because they'll pick up stuff really easily. And this also applies to me because I've been a observational learned things since I was really young, and I still do it even to this day. When I play sports, I observe and learn all the time. I've changed my batting stance to Ryan Braun's. I pole vault just because I saw the world record holder do it one time. And then I also, I might play basketball a certain way just because I saw Kyrie Irving cross someone up one time, and I'm like, oh, I should try that too. These are all examples of observing someone you look up to and learning from them. Moving on to industrial and organizational psychology. One way industrial and organizational psychology is used is by predicting who'll be the best hire. So things employers use are an interview, cognitive skills tests, personality assessments, your work history, right? Your skills are important, as the higher cognitive skills you have, the more difficult and complex tasks you can complete. So for example, my first job was making egg rolls. Wasn't very complex at all. I just put them in the fryer and I was pretty much done. My next job, being a server, a lot more complex. I got paid more, and I had a more intense interview. And being a server, you have to monitor the restaurant, make sure you get all the orders right, all that. And this relates to me and you because every employer nowadays is using these assessments when hiring. We all have to work with the system and try and put our best impression forward to these employers. Examples: when I got a job for a swimming instructor. For my interview, I had to show off my swimming skills in the pool. This is an example of This is an example of a skill assessment to see if I'm qualified for the job and see if I can complete these complex tasks of teaching little kiddos how to swim. Moving on to personality. Although cognitive skills and work history are important when hiring, personality is also very important. Personality can be divided into emotional stability, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and these traits can predict how good of a leader you are, and tolerance for others, and IQ, and other useful traits for the complex job you're applying to and life in general. Personality tests can predict who will die first, who's more likely to get divorced. Every employer is using these assessments to decide your personality, and it's a big factor on whether you get hired or not. Employers will be asking your work history, and they'll try and find your personality from that. One example for me is my employer for my swimming instructor saw I was a landscaper. Although very different jobs, it told me that 1, I was physically fit, and 2, I had the discipline to have a job in the first place. So we all have to be part of the system whether we like it or not, and we have to deal with these interview questions and letters of recommendation and resumes and all that. So personality and skill are both important to job success and getting hired. And that is it, and oh my god, that was forever. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Bye.